what were your thoughts to the Super Bowl? Do you think Tom Brady is the greatest quarterback to ever play the game? And if you do, why?
Yeah, absolutely, Errol. I think that a lot of the points that you had brought up are very relevant. I mean, being relatively new to football, I can confidently say that Tom Brady's the greatest that I've ever seen play and the greatest of my generation. To go back to Joe Montana, you know what? I wasn't privy to that. I wasn't watching football then, but for what Tom Brady has done in his career and being able to continue to bring the level of intensity and competition that he has, he brought from Foxborough. He brought that into Tampa. He instilled that in that team. And I'm not saying that Tom Brady won them that Super Bowl, but he certainly was a big piece and a reason why that team was galvanized and set for a championship. Like coming into the playoffs, I didn't know what to expect from Tampa until that first round. And I'm like, this is a team that is super gritty and will do whatever it takes to win. Just like Tom Brady and those Patriots teams, they found, dude, we saw a different Tampa team win on offense every single week, right? Like their defense was tenacious throughout, but they found a way to score every single week against those tough defenses that they were up against. And that to me, Tom Brady, is he the only reason why they won? No, of course not. Their defense was tremendous. People also don't talk about their O-line play as well. Like also Gronk was used as an offensive lineman the entire playoffs until the Super Bowl, right? Like he was in the trenches every single playoff game. And it wasn't until that last game that he was really used as a receiver. People overlook that because, winning in the trenches on that O-line might not be the sexiest thing to talk about, but it certainly played a big, big role. And you look at the pieces that Brady kind of brought in that you knew were to protect him, right? Like we know what Gronk can do in the blocking game. And he was that was a big reason why he was brought in. And then we saw the kind of the crazy rotation at running back all season long. And I think a lot of that had to do about protecting Tom Brady. So I can confidently say that Tom Brady is the greatest quarterback of my generation. Absolutely.
So from a great offensive line to a banged-up offensive line, the Chiefs missing 2 tackles in the Super Bowl, and you could definitely see Mahomes was running for his life. It was the highest pressure rate in any Super Bowl, 52% that they got. So being that it was that much of a blowout, 31-9 final score, and it really looked like Tampa was in control of the game, what do you think the outcome would have been like if either one and or both of the tackles were in there? Do the Chiefs win with both tackles? Is it a close game? Do they still lose? What do you think?
Yeah, I want to rewind it a little bit to a Canadian boy that they were missing the entire season in Tardif. He's a Pro Bowl lineman that they didn't have all season. Having him and a healthy O-line in this game would have been a world of difference. I still think that the outcome Tampa would have won, but Mahomes ran for over 500 yards behind scrimmage, guys. Behind scrimmage. Like that's absolutely insane. And what Mahomes was able to do under pressure, like, man, like I bet you Kelsey is just sitting in a deep hole of regret and shame right now because of the opportunities that he missed. He just doesn't miss those opportunities usually, right? And then we saw with that Williams pass in the end zone that bounced off of his face. I think that it would be a different game, but to what we were talking about earlier, this Tampa team was on a mission, and their defense absolutely destroyed that O-line. The other thing too that, some people are talking about, but the PI calls that Kansas was kind of getting all season, they didn't get. They've been grabbing and holding all season long on wide receivers, and the refs called it. I thought they made the right calls every single time.
Well, I will say this, and they should have called it both ways. We saw Devin White a couple of times in the second quarter grabbing on to wide receivers and obviously the running backs when they use the running backs. And by the way, I don't know what happened to the running game of the Kansas City Chiefs. The whole thing with Andy Reid.
What running game?
That's what I'm saying. I'm surprised he didn't use any of the running backs in the open field, maybe as a wide receiver, especially that Hill was getting dominated by either being trampled by 2 or 3 guys. Why didn't they use the wide receiver? They brought in Le'Veon Bell, who's very, very good in the passing game. Why didn't they use Le'Veon Bell? It made absolutely no sense why they brought him in when he was let go by the New York Jets, he wanted to go to Kansas City. He probably would have been better off playing for Tampa Bay. I mean, seriously.
Give Hilaire some credit, though. He did play well at times in that game.
Who did?
Hilaire.
Yeah.
Clyde Edwards-Hilaire.
Yeah, but they didn't use him enough.
He did.
Well, you're down 21-6 at halftime.
It just terrible.
It was the only thing that was Clyde Edwards-Hilaire, the Fresh Prince of Hilaire, was the only thing that was working for them all game. Right?
Mm-hmm. It was just, I don't know. The play, first of all, the play calling by Andy Reid didn't make any sense. It really didn't. No. And I don't want to hear about Eric Bieniemy, because Eric Bieniemy right now he's going to be a free agent. And I said this, Doug Peterson is available, okay? And Doug Peterson is Andy Reid's best friend, his disciple. And Eric, and it might not be such a bad thought to look at Eric Bieniemy and say that he interviewed for 16 jobs and he didn't get one of them. This is one of the best offensive minds in the NFL right now, and everybody thought was the number one coach available this offseason, and he interviewed for almost 7 jobs and still didn't land a job. So what does that tell you about Eric Bieniemy? One, he doesn't interview very well. And number two, maybe teams don't really think he's as good as everybody thinks he is. Maybe they think because if it's Andy Reid's offense, maybe because it's Andy Reid's play calling, they don't think Eric Bieniemy might not be a very good coach moving forward in the NFL. And I think he'll get a job, but to me, 16 times you interview, 17 times you interview for a job in 3 years, and you don't get one of them. To me, that's a little scary moving forward for any team to take on Eric Bieniemy. What do you think, Will?
I don't have a ton. I mean, it is kind of irregular that, he's interviewed for 16 teams. And, the play calling in that Super Bowl was bad. Is that on Bieniemy? I don't know that locker room. I don't know that team well enough to really make an accurate call on that.
I can. The answer is do not hire Eric Bieniemy, because I know the Jets interviewed for him, and everybody. I was one of the guys that said I want Eric Bieniemy. But then when I'm hearing some of the stories that I've heard and some of the executives saying that the guy just doesn't interview very, very well, or he doesn't give the right answers to the questions, that would scare you as an owner of a team, as a GM of a team, or anything, any position that you're looking at when you're trying to fill in a coach job moving forward as a Super Bowl contender. So I think it's a little scary. As you guys know, we are talking to the creator of the Canadian National Best Ball Champions League, Will Harris.
So moving on to your Steelers, they had a very strange season. They were the last undefeated team left. It looked like they were rolling along, and then all of a sudden they lose to Washington, which annoyed me as a Giants fan because the Giants make the playoffs if Washington loses that game. But, I mean, it really went downhill after that. The offensive skill players, which played well in the beginning of the season, started to fall apart. And then the Steelers had that big dud in the playoffs against the Browns. So what was your impression of that kind of season? Which Steelers team do you think is the more accurate depiction of who they really are? What do you think they should do in the offseason?
Yeah, great question, and one that I have had way too much time to ponder because I was pretty hopeful as a Steelers fan. We saw what the defense did last year. We saw what an offense without Big Ben did. So I thought, okay, healthy Big Ben, this defense is only going to continue to get better. We should experience, I thought at the start of the season, a Super Bowl run. I think the kind of perception and the reality of the Steelers, there's two extremes. People said they're the worst 11-0 team that we've ever seen in the NFL. And others were thinking, Steeler diehards was saying, you know what, we're going all the way to the Super Bowl with this team. I think that the truth was somewhere in the middle the entire time. As the season started to unfold for the Steelers, there were some serious issues. There were some serious issues in the run game. There was also just in terms of the average depth of target that we were seeing from Big Ben. There were some big issues that were revealing themselves on offense. I also, I think that people understated the loss of Bud Dupree to that defense as well. I think that, TJ Watt, absolutely tremendous. I think that he was robbed of Defensive Player of the Year. That's nothing against Aaron Donald. Watt just had a transcendent season this year and should have been recognized for it, not to take anything away from Aaron Donald. But you watch when that Steelers losing streak started? It was when Bud Dupree went down. And I mean, not that Bud Dupree is going to turn the world on his head when he signs as a free agent somewhere else, but he was able to do a lot because of what TJ Watt was doing. And them working in tandem allowed for that defense to put a ton of pressure on opposing teams. And when that defense wasn't able to apply that pressure and the defense wasn't able to win them games because the offense was, for all intents and purposes, was a shadow of itself of what it was when, AB and Lev Bell were there, you had some really, really big problems. So the effect on the offensive side of the ball, I saw these issues way before that kind of collapse against Washington. But when I remember being on my show, the Jet Sweep show, and I had a question from a listener saying, do you think the Steelers are going to go, they're going to go undefeated this season? And it was before that Washington game. I said, well, they got to get by Washington first, right? That defense, like that Washington defense is for real. They're set, we know what their front seven is all about, but their secondary is also lights out and pretty scary to play against, especially when your quarterback can't chuck it downfield anymore. So I wasn't really surprised when we kind of fizzled out on the end of the season. I will say though, and again, it's about meeting in the middle. That Steelers team wasn't as bad as everybody said they were, and they weren't as good as everybody said they were. I was absolutely blown away that they lost to the Browns. I've got no answers for that. I'm still kind of thinking about it. They let the Browns play their game, and you can't let any team do that. I think that there was a false sense of confidence being at home at Heinz Field. We know how Big Ben plays at home, and I don't think that they took the Browns seriously. You can't in the NFL. On any given Sunday, anything can happen, and look what happened. The Browns won a playoff game in Pittsburgh. Like, I never would have expected that to happen. I don't think that Cleveland is that great of a team, but they found a way to beat Pittsburgh, and they beat them handily. Like, that game wasn't even close, and I'm talking from the very beginning to the end. Pittsburgh was not in that game ever.
Well, before we let you go, I have one question to ask you, and one question,
Sure.
and last question. DeShaun Watson, does he get traded, and where do you think he goes?
Great question. It seems to be that the Jets and Chicago are the two teams that are bandied about. You hear a little bit about San Francisco. I mean, I think about it more selfishly from a fantasy football perspective and what that could potentially mean. I don't know. I don't think that my take is that I don't think that anything happens until closer to the season. That Stafford deal sunk the market for DeShaun and what teams are willing to pay. And I don't think it's until close to training camp that we see him get moved. And when teams are either ready to pay the price, or the Texans are so scared that they're not going to get a return, or they're going to have to watch DeShaun sit out, that we're going to see a deal happen. There seems to be more murmurs for Wentz to go to Chicago than anything else. And the strongest rumors that I've heard is to New York, to the Jets in your guys' backyard, which I wouldn't hate.
No, I think I would say Carson Wentz, if he goes anywhere, he's going to Indianapolis. That's where I think he's on his way to. And DeShaun Watson.
The Frank Reich?
Yeah, I think DeShaun Watson, he has a better chance if he goes anywhere, he goes to the Jets, because if he goes to the Jets, Sam Darnold goes to the 49ers, and they get what they want. So I think both teams get what they want. They both get young quarterbacks, and DeShaun Watson. I don't think the Jets are going to – any team is going to wait until the beginning of the season when they have to figure things out and where, how they're going to build their team in free agency. And by the way, they got the second pick in the draft. So I think it'll be more around the draft where you're going to hear some stories coming out where DeShaun Watson is going. He will be traded. I will tell you that. He is absolutely going to get traded. So
For sure.
yes, I don't see him staying there. There is no way Houston, he's going to want to play over there in Houston. I see Cleveland posting up he's going to stay in Houston. He's not staying in
If
Houston.
he does, he's going to hold out.
Yeah, he's not staying in Houston. There is no way he's staying in Houston. What they're trying to do right now is they're telling him that we're not going to trade you because it's going to open up the spring of trade picks and